Hello, you beautiful people. Welcome back to the long-term podcast. Today, we have a teacher who has been teaching for almost 4 decades, Bill Boyne. We will discuss how he has survived teaching for all those decades, why he still teaches even though he is retired, and a bunch of stories relating to the students and teachers. And Mr. Boyne has touched many lives, including mine, and he still continues to do so even in his retirement. And this is a phenomenal episode, and it was quite a funny one. Is Mr. Boyne's humor, I swear, if he wasn't a teacher, he could do stand-up. I think he still could. Honestly, Mr. Boyne, do stand-up, please. Everyone, welcome. But yeah, today I've fully prepared, and thank you for this.
Oh, you're welcome.
Bill Boyne, everyone. Welcome to the long-term podcast.
Well, thank you for having me on, Advin. I remember you and I talking about this. We were both having a workout at Millennium, and you broached that idea, and I thought, ooh, I'm not too sure about this, but you know what? I gave it some thought, and I after thinking about that, I said, well, you know what? I probably got some pretty good stories that maybe some of your listeners might enjoy reliving again, because I understand some of your listeners are former students.
Many of them, actually, like majority of them. Usually with the way that I plan this out, I share the questions and the guest answers them prior, and Mr. Boyne's stories are just too funny, and I can't wait to get into all this. But first off, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, so I'm a retired teacher, but haven't really figured out how to retire yet. So I had a career that spanned 36 years, and I retired in June of 2022. But I always had thought that, I'm probably going to continue on doing some casual substitute teaching. But that almost morphed into another career, because I've had now the opportunity to kind of experiment and dabble in areas that I wasn't able to do when I had a full-time job. So, for instance, I can go to the high school here in Sherwood Park and substitute teach there. I can still go to the middle school where I was a teacher for, quite a few years, about 13 years, I believe. And it just gives me the opportunity to try some different things. In my first year, I actually replaced a grade 5 teacher, and it was a Ukrainian class. Now,
and you don't speak Ukrainian.
I speak about 4 or 5 words of Ukrainian, right? I can say good morning, and I can say good day, and thank you, and that's about it. So they offloaded the Ukrainian part from me, and another teacher taught that while I went and taught one of her classes. But within days of my arrival, I received a new kid who came from the eastern part of Ukraine who couldn't speak any English at all. And his Ukrainian was a mixed dialect of Ukrainian and Russian. So even the Ukrainian teachers there couldn't speak. So it's like, okay, what am I going to do with this poor guy? And so I got together with one of our Ukrainian teachers, and I gave her the 20 most important words that he'll hear from me during the day. And we made a list of the 20 words with the Ukrainian version. And then I would just go over to his desk if he was calling me, and I'd say, which of these are you pointing to? And I could see what the English translation was. So keywords like washroom, lunchtime, time to go home, mainly reasons to get out of the classroom. But that's how we basically functioned initially to begin with, because our communication was, it was really, really limited, because even when we tried to speak with them I tried to speak with them through a translator, I would sometimes hear, I'm not quite understanding what he's trying to say. So that was definitely a challenge. This past year, I took a 2-week stint for a teacher who had gone on to mat leave just before the end of semester 1 at the high school. And it was a French immersion science class that I was teaching. So I taught a grade 9 and grade 10 French immersion class.
Your learning curve must be.
And I do know a few more words in French than I do in Ukrainian, but basically I said, I really don't know a whole lot of French. So maybe to appease you, I'll just speak English with a French accent. And of course, my French accent wasn't all that good either. So like I said, I've been able to kind of experiment with some areas that I wouldn't normally have done or felt comfortable enough to take that risk since I started substitute teaching. And then lastly, just in the past 3 months of this, or toward the last 3 months of this current school year, I was a language arts teacher, grade 8. I had 3 sections of language arts. And of course, people are looking and say, you're teaching language arts? You're like a math, science, phys ed teacher. And by the time I was done, I was pretty good at annotating poetry and fracturing fairy tales. So it's been a lot of fun.
It's amazing that you've started this other path after retirement. You're taking up all these classes and you're learning Ukrainian, French, and different types of kids too. And you still get to keep up with your passion and not have the full-time commitments. Well,
and that's what is best about this. It's like I have the best of both worlds here right now because everything that I do is temporary, but the longest I'm ever going to really get is maybe a 3-month contract. So I don't have to worry about things that a teacher on staff would have to worry about, like what direction is the school heading? Do you get along with your boss? Are you going to get a good teaching assignment? Are you going to end up teaching a bunch of subjects you don't want to teach? The direction that maybe education policy is heading. None of that stuff bothers me. I sit through staff meetings, the ones that I have to go to, and it's not like it used to be where you're kind of uptight about what you might hear. You hear more stuff that you think, boy, I'm glad I'm not in their shoes, or things that don't really matter, and I can just sort of sit there and relax and take it all in. So that makes it that makes this part of my career very, very interesting and makes me want to keep on going.
That's phenomenal. So how have you survived almost 4 decades? My first question is, what motivated you to start a career in teaching, and how has that motivation evolved over the years?
So how many of you listening out there are going to say the 2-month holiday in the summer?
That is a big perk. That's what a lot of...
it is. But what I've always said to people that want to, like my dad was terrible. He's, you teachers, you get 2 months off in the summer and you work from 9 till 3:30 and you get all the other holidays everybody gets. And he just never realized that there's a lot of other stuff that you have to do behind the scenes. A lot of people, when they finish their workday, they're done. For me, that was never the case. I was coaching. You have to mark. You have to, remember how I used to get things done in 24 hours?
You were a very disciplined teacher. Now looking back at the time when I was in your class, this guy just marks really fast. Now as an adult, wow, I noticed the teachers that are disciplined, and you were coaching teams and you had all the marks and you were teaching a bunch of different classes all at the same day. And then some teachers I find now, like looking back, it took them 2 months to get marks back.
Well, I as a student, I hated that. I absolutely hate it when, a teacher would say, we're going to have that back to you in a few days. And then a few days turns into a few weeks. And like, I can almost see what happens now being in teaching, that, you've got that pile of assignments and you move the garbage can a little bit closer and not, just have a twitch and all of a sudden all the papers fall in the garbage cans. I don't know what I did with those. So, so it like I've always tried to, almost model hard work so that the students that I taught would be more inclined to work hard too.
Mm-hmm. And when you were in your 20s, did you know you wanted to be a teacher?
No. I would call my 20s kind of like the lost decade, because it was that decade where I was trying to figure out what my life's work was going to be. So I had so when I was doing my bachelor's degree, I had a professor say to me, well, instead of like doing what everybody else is doing and going into teaching, and of course I was in Ontario at that time and there weren't really a whole lot of opportunities. You'd have to go pretty far north. So she said, why don't you look at postgraduate work? is you've got a pretty good knack for writing research and doing research. So that's what brought me to Alberta. I came to the University of Alberta to work on a Master's of Science. Now, that was all fine and dandy, but I wasn't really prepared for the kind of life that a graduate student typically leads. It's almost like indentured servitude because your faculty advisor basically utilizes you a lot to do a lot of their work, but then they take all the credit and you might get a little acknowledgement. And I never really did connect with my faculty advisor and realized after a couple of years that this wasn't really going anywhere and it wasn't really the route that I thought was best for me. So I became a working stiff for about 3 years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then I decided to go back to the U of A and get my after degree. And so I came out in 1986. That was my first year of teaching, and I was 29 years old. So I think one advantage is that I had a certain level of maturity that maybe you wouldn't have had if you came out at 22 years of age. But the same problem persisted in Alberta that was in Ontario. They were in the middle of a recession here at that time. And so there wasn't a lot of hiring going on, unless, again, you wanted to go really far north into the backwoods of Alberta, which, I mean, I was married at the time, so I had to think about the life that my wife was going to have to lead with me working in an environment like that. So interesting, we talked about my substitute teaching career at the end of my career. That's how I got started. I was a casual substitute teacher who caught on to a few temporary jobs again. But this first time around, I couldn't be picky like I am now. I would pretty much take anything and hope that whoever was watching me might be inclined to hire me on a more permanent basis.
Right. And I think you're a testament to a lot of the kids that I know right now, because a lot of them are switching degrees. A lot of them are even in master's programs right now, and they're thinking, oh, is this really it for me? But it took you till 29 until you actually found something you wanted to do, and you tried all these things. Now, can you share some of the biggest challenges you faced during your teaching career and how you overcame them?
Well, the biggest challenge I had was actually trying to get full-time work where I knew every year that I would have that job. So when I first came out from getting my degree and I started teaching, as I said, I was a casual substitute teacher. I took on some long-term contracts, and by long-term, I would mean anywhere from 3 to maybe 5 months. I worked in a rural school. I then got a 2-week teaching assignment at the Edmonton Young Offender Center. And that turned into a 7-year stay.
Oh, that's quite the short stay.
Yeah. So you kind of never know, like opportunity just kind of sometimes just falls in your lap by being in the right place at the right time. So I did that for 7 years, but then felt that it was time for a change. But I kind of didn't mind what I was doing. So I ended up with a public school district and was seconded to work at a institution for children that had severe behavioral disorders. So these are kids that couldn't function in a regular school. And so we had this institution had a school setting where they had certified teachers that would do the teaching part. And that was another 6 years. So I spent 13 years working with special needs kids, but probably the kids that most people wouldn't really want to work with because of their unpredictability, their temperament. And so by the time I had gotten to the end of the 6 years at that facility, I was beginning to think to myself, is teaching, for me, like, is this all there is? Because I was getting a rather biased look at what teaching was all about, because these were all kids that couldn't function in a regular school. I thought, I'd like to be in a place where, the kids are in a regular school. And what would that be like to teach? So as luck would have it, another opportunity opened up. And I'm 23 years ago, so 15 years after I started, I ended up in the school district that I've been at since that time. And so it was a bit of a roundabout way. And within a year, I had a continuous contract. And so it took about 16 years for me to finally get to a point where I knew that I had some job security, which was important for my family because I had a growing family at the time. And that I knew come September, I actually knew what I was going to be doing.
Yeah. And to retract, I'm sure you felt very unsafe in those days, right? You had mentioned that it was about getting through the day for that type of environments.
Yeah. So in those 13 years, I never really worried about covering a whole lot of curriculum. It was more like managing a classroom and hoping that, nobody would try to kill somebody or beat somebody up it was kind of like survival. And these programs had, school programs in these institutions because they were easy and they would cover a lot of time. You would take up 6 hours a day, Monday through Friday, with programming during the day for these people. And this was the simplest way to do it.
So what strategies or practices have you found most effective in maintaining your passion and energy for teaching over such a long period?
Well, I think anybody who knows me knows that I have a pretty wild sense of humor. And that's what has really kept me going. I just like being in front of a group, and I know I'm teaching, but sometimes I feel like I'm entertaining also at the same time. So I always really like that part. Now, did humor come out right away when I started teaching? No, because I was like a fairly typical young teacher. You take your job very, very seriously. You think teaching is a serious business. I'm going to educate all these young people and turn them into productive adults in society. And there's no real room for joking around. So, initially, I don't think I was a teacher that had a whole lot of humor, but I was pretty demanding. And so that could sometimes rub people the wrong way too, because, well, doesn't this guy ever smile, or is he always serious about work, work, work? So I found over time, as my career evolved and I became a little bit more confident, I could bring humor in. So one of the first ways I did that was with my own staff. I became known as a prankster. And so like no prank was off limits to me, but I had rules for pranks. So pranks couldn't really cause any like discernible damage. It would just maybe inconvenience somebody for some time while they tried to undo what you did, or it would, kind of cause them to maybe laugh or maybe almost be motivated to try to retaliate if they found out who you were. But the best thing about a prank too is to do it in such a way that nobody even knows that you were the one that did it. So I'm just trying to think of a couple pranks that I did. I think one of them, okay. So I'd started in my new school district, the one that I'd been at for 23 years. And when you hear this story, it's surprising I've been here for 23 years because this happened. Sorry
to cut you off, but this is the main camera too. Or I think you're looking at that one, but that one's the main one.
Okay.
This one's just like a trial, like second one. Yeah. I noticed that. But going back to the pranks.
So when I go back to the pranks, the one that I thought was one of the best ones that I've done was just after I started in my new school district. And surprising with some of the pranks that I do that, I've managed to keep my employment for 23 years. But this one, so we had our staff, our administration, I should say, would go off on their annual retreats. And the teachers are all kind of a little jealous because in those days, the money was flowing a little bit better. And so they would always go to somewhere like Victoria, BC for 4 or 5 days. And so they would be gone from the building. And so that would give you lots of time to be able to figure out something to do and then actually have the time to do it. So I'd been at this school for 6 weeks and I rounded up a couple student teachers to do the dirty work for me. And we went to the assistant principal's office and proceeded to empty his entire room out We took all his furniture out. He had this great big desk, this L-shaped desk. And, it took a lot of maneuvering to get that out, but we finally got it out of the room. And then he said, well, what are we going to do with this room? So I said, well, let's go to the library. There's some couches. We moved some couches in. I don't know if any of you remember, like maybe your parents or your grandparents had one of these, probably your grandparents, but you used to be able to buy these fireplaces that were fake fireplaces. And basically what you would do is you would plug it in and a light would shine on and it would look like the fireplace is glowing. So we had one of those. So we put one of those in there. So we put a few amenities in there and we took his nameplate off the door and then put a new nameplate that said staff lounge. Now, in the process of doing this, like I said, he had a very large L-shaped desk and we were having trouble getting that out. So in the process of moving that thing out, we bent it right where the two legs of the L meet. So when he finally moved it back in and everything like that, he's kind of complaining, well, whoever did this bent my desk. And so every time I would go into his office after that, I would lean on his desk because I know it would rock back and forth. I would make a comment like, so what's with these desks nowadays? They don't really make them like they used to. So that was one that I thought was really good.
And the student teachers, were they terrified? Were they,
well, they just kind of did what they were told, like they're trying to make an impression and everything. Mm. So they weren't even my student teachers. They were somebody else's student teachers, but I said, come on, let's do this. And so they came along and did it. But another one I had was, now there are certain times of the year where you just don't want to be pranked. Okay. So this happened the night before the first day of school. So the same assistant principal who I had pranked before, actually, him and I pranked this other teacher. So we got to do something here to make his day start off bad tomorrow, the first day of school. So we had an industrial sized roll of saran wrap, great big huge roll of saran wrap. And we proceeded to wrap his entire desk and all the belongings on his desk and his phone and anything else we could get our hands on. We basically just mummified everything. And, we knew like he had to use his desk that day and all the stuff that was on his desk. Like back then, the only way that we really communicated, because this was before cell phones, was the telephone. So he had to get all that, put in order before school started. So we managed to go and do all that. And I says, oh, let's just finish this off. So I went next door to the teacher's room next door, found her mark book and threw the mark book on a desk right by his desk to make it look like she had walked in there to do something else and then said, hey, I got a great idea. Dropped down her mark book, went and did all the saran wrapping, left the room and forgot to take her mark book. So, I mean, this guy was mad at this teacher for 6 months. It was just kind of funny to see that. Now, the assistant principal managed to get back up. He figured out that I was the one that was behind the removal of his furniture. And he waited 3 years before he retaliated back to me because he knew, like, usually when you're a prankster, you're always kind of on your guard and everything like that. But after a couple of years, you begin to think, oh, well, they probably just forgot about it or they're not going to bother. So he actually got one of the volleyball teams to empty out the entire phys ed equipment room and unload it in my classroom. So again, the perfect prank. It didn't really create any damage or anything like that, but I probably had to spend an hour and a half, moving all this stuff out of my room so that I could have students in there and then return that back to the equipment room. So that kind of stuff goes on all the time. There's like we used to do stuff like open up a can of sardines and stick it in somebody's overhead projector in the radiator. So when the heat came on, you'd smell nothing but fish. Vaseline, the whiteboard markers, the door handles, and anything else that might be a touch surface. Those kinds of things were the really quick ones that we could do. But what ended up happening was we just got so much more busier as teachers. And I think people started getting a little bit more sensitive about that kind of stuff too. So that just kind of went by the wayside.
It seems so much more fun to be a teacher back in the day.
Well, and it was interesting because at my retirement function, there was they put together a slideshow. And I remember a few of the younger teachers that came were looking at some of the things that were going on in the slideshow. And I remember one saying, man, you guys had a way more fun than we do today at like after school and with all the stuff that goes on kind of like after hours. So yeah, it changed. So my humor really had to kind of morph into the classroom itself.
You had to keep up with the times. Now, your humor had to stem from somewhere. Now, what's its origin? How did you get this sense of humor?
So, interesting story. I hope I don't offend anybody with this story, but I'm talking about a different era of time. So this occurred in the 1970s. So I was always kind of a one-liner kind of guy. I could just deliver a one-liner and, people would laugh and everything like that. And it almost sort of became kind of like a wise guy with the wise guy cracks and everything. So when I was doing my bachelor's degree in Ontario, I lived in a residence, but the residence system in Ontario is much different than it is in Alberta. Alberta, when you look at a residence, it's more like a dorm, and there's fraternities. In Ontario, you don't really see a presence of, your typical Greek name fraternities, but the residences aren't like dorms either. And so this residence, it was a men's residence because there was no such thing as co-ed residence back then. So it was either women's residences or men's residences. So ours was divided into 5 vertical houses, and we were all very much rivals. But one thing that our house would do every year is they would host a stag. So a stag is like, well, you hear that word being used more like when we talk about what, a guy getting married does with all his buddies before he actually gets married. So these things were held as fundraisers. They were held as gatherings for things like fraternities, besides just, for, like a pre-wedding activity.
You guys just party?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And so we would usually have a dinner and some awards and other hijinks that would go on. But this one year, they decided to rent a strip club and like basically take over the strip club for the entire night so that just our guests could come in. And so that's what they did. And I got double dog dared. Somebody said, you don't have the guts to get up on stage and do a comedy routine. And I, of course,
back down from that.
You can't back. Like that's a brother daring another brother. You can't actually, you can't, shy away from that. So I got myself into that. Now, in a strip club back in the 60s and 70s, the model for the strip club was they would have like maybe 3 or 4 shows a night, and you would have 2 or 3 dancers, and you would have the house comedian. Now, the house comedian was somebody who would kind of be the guy that you would break up between the dancers that would go out there and, tell some jokes and try to get the people to laugh. But they were usually guys that were down on their luck comedians that weren't really very successful, and the only gigs they could get were gigs in strip clubs. But occasionally you would have somebody who was an up-and-comer that would get their start there and actually be quite good, wouldn't really spend a whole lot of time there, and would move on further. So like when they talk about stand-up comedy now, it wasn't really like that back then. That's where you would see the comedians is in, these places of ill repute. And so I was going to be the host comedian that night. So, I mean, I had to really, really prepare. And, you think, well, he could have just Googled that. No, we're talking about 1977, I think. And so I actually had to go to the library and get books on telling jokes and books on, like being an MC at a wedding and all that, all those sorts of things to try to put something together. I also knew who my audience was going to be. And I said, if I really want to be funny, I got to personalize these jokes so that I can pick on some of the people that are in the audience. So I worked on that. I, got my routine together, and then I would literally practice in front of the mirror just so that I could be more fluid in my delivery. And so, the big night came, I had a couple bottles of liquid courage and was ready to go. So I'm backstage. One of the dancers is out, and there's all kinds of noise and everything going on. And so I'm waiting to hear my cue because I can't hear the MC talking. And the guy backstage, who was one of my brothers, says, "Okay, you're on." And so on I came, and I came right in the middle of my introduction. So it was like, okay, did that guy back there just prank me? So that was the only hiccup that I had. Once I got out there and started laying on some zingers, I mean, I was on fire. And you know that you're doing well when the guy you're picking on in the crowd is really pissed off at you and everybody else is laughing like crazy. And so I survived. I went through. And like there was no limits to the jokes that I told. I was making fun of brothers' manhood, their girlfriends, their mothers.
No exception.
There was no exception. So Advin, don't ask me to tell you any jokes because we might get canceled here if I repeat any of those. But it was definitely a different time. And so from there, I knew that I could get up in front of a group of people and keep them entertained. So that was really where my humor kind of developed. And then it took a while for me to be able to bring it into the classroom. And again, you have to be kind of careful now of what type of humor you use because we're in different times now than we were back then.
That's true.
That's
and
for
why
sure.
didn't you become a comedian, Mr. Boyne? You could have followed that route. I mean, that was your first time on stage and you had the crowd in an uproar. You could have followed that. You'd be...
Well, do you remember? So you know who Jerry D is?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I could have been Jerry D.
Yeah.
So Jerry D, for those of you who don't know, he was, so he's a comedian and he had his own TV show called Mr. D's. And now he is the Canadian host of Family Feud. But he started out as a teacher and he, I think, probably decided after a number of years that there's got to be something better than this, or, you know, like I'm a funny guy. Maybe I can make more money being a comedian. And so he started, I think, on the Score sports show, interviewing different personalities. And he was funny and he was good at it. And yeah, in fact, he wrote a book called Teaching It's Not As Easy as It Looks. So yeah, maybe I could have been Jerry D, but I kind of missed my calling.
Hey,
I think.
it's never too late. How do you integrate humor in the classroom?
Well, I know I was, so I'm not really a joke teller. People say, well, you've got funny jokes. And it's like, no, I think I got funny stories. I don't know if I have funny jokes because I'm not really that much of a joke teller anymore. But what I would seem to have a knack for doing is observing a situation and then seeing some humor in it and making a comment about it to get people laughing. Now, having said that, well, one thing I used to like to do is give kids nicknames. Advin, do you remember your nickname?
Advil. Hey, Mr. Boyne used to go, Advil, you're giving me a headache. But I could take it though. You knew your audience. Like I wasn't going home and crying about it. Like,
no,
it was funny.
That's it.
Really
you have to really know who your audience, especially now. Like there's some people that you just wouldn't think of giving them a nickname because you know it would really hurt their feelings, and you would probably be getting some blowback on that. But then there are people that are almost like, please, you know, pick on me here. I'm looking for some attention or whatever. And so I did that. But what I've kind of more as I've aged is I've gotten more into self-depreciating humor. And so all kinds of jokes about the fact that I'm older and maybe, you know, from a different generation than the kids that I teach now. I would say that, you know, things like if I don't want to hear a kid's question, so somebody's asking me to do something and I don't really want to do it, or I'll just say, well, you're going to have to speak louder. I left my hearing aids at home. Or, you know, being forgetful about something. You know, I'll have my glasses on top of my head, knowing that they're there. And I'll just say, hey, can somebody tell me where my glasses are? And, you know, and the kids will actually believe that I'm, you know, that feeble. There's a program that our school was involved in called Linking Generations, which is a program, really good program. It pairs up kids from our school with seniors that live in the seniors' residence across the street from the school that I taught at. And everybody wants to get into that program, but there's a limited number of spots. I think there's maybe about 20 spots per year. And so you would see some kids, that didn't make the cut, and they'd be really, really disappointed. And I, pat them on the back and say, you know what? That's okay. I said, you can come and join me for lunch and you can feed me my applesauce. So, and that would kind of make them feel a little bit better. I didn't really have any takers on that, but the self-depreciating humor is the humor that I did. Now, there was a really funny prank that was played on me. Okay. So, as I said, the seniors' home is across the street from our school. And like any large places like that, they have to have fire drills, just like schools have fire drills. And so we got an email one day and it said, please don't have any of your kids in the front foyer of the school, as the seniors' residents from across the street are going to use that as a muster place to gather for their fire drill. And no sooner than that email went out, one wise guy, staff member, sent another email saying, who's going to cover Boyne's class while he goes for his fire drill with his fellow residents?
I read that, I died laughing. It doesn't get old. To everyone?
Oh, it was a send all. Yeah, everybody got that. It wasn't just me. Everybody got
great.
that one.
That's
and of course, the litany of reply alls that came after that, and
just died laughing.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much most of the section for the first topic, but I'd like to touch more on your teaching method, because you add discipline, but at the same time, the humor is there, but the discipline is there, because sure, kids can laugh in your class, and I've been in your class, so I know what the Boyne experience is like, because you can get really funny incorporating humor into discipline. Like I remember you talking about, hey, don't ask for retakes. I don't want to hear those crocodile or see those crocodile tears. Remember that?
Well, and we need that, and we'd have to have the beach towels too to dry them up, right? Yeah.
So, like, what's the premise of your teaching? Like when it comes to teaching these kids, like what do you want them to take away? Because you get, for a great deal of their week, you're talking to them, and especially if they're your homeroom teacher, you're seeing them all the time. So how do you typically approach the day in mind? How do you prepare, and how do you kind of go about the teaching process?
Well, the one big word you said there is prepare. You have to be ready. And kids are smart enough. They know when you haven't prepared. And it's pretty obvious. Like a lot of people figure, oh, they won't notice. Well, they definitely do notice. And so preparation is definitely something that I take pretty seriously. I'm kind of a go to school on Sunday, get ready for the week kind of person. And it's funny because I'll have colleagues, even when I'm retired, I will do that. And they say, well, aren't you retired? Like, take it easy or whatever. And it's like, no, my comfort level is to make sure that I go in there and have all my ducks in a row before the week starts. So I make sure that's all done. Being the guy that can get things marked in 24 hours. Now, I'm going to veer off here a little bit. So many of you who are listening that have been taught by me know that you got feedback within 24 hours. But I had one kid, he actually called me the Jesus marker. He said, basically, he says, all you do, Mr. Boyne, is you put the stack of papers in front, you take your hand like Jesus, you pass across it, and everything is marked. And I thought, well, if it was only that easy. So that's something that what I don't like having is I don't like having the pile growing taller and taller on my desk with things that aren't getting done. So that's something that is very, very essential to the effectiveness of, how I teach. But the other thing too, is I like to have a lot of structure in the classroom, and structure means that there's going to be certain procedures and rules that have to be adhered to. And you'll hear the kids groaning and saying, oh, why are there so many rules? And, why why can't we have more free time and everything? But, kids crave, they crave structure, and they also want to know what to expect when they come in your classroom. And I think when you have structure and predictability, it creates a very safe environment. And the kids want to know, or they want to have confidence that the adult in the room is in charge. So that's also something that is really, really important. I preach hard work. Nothing really gets accomplished unless you're willing to put the time in to do things. And I've often said that, like, everybody wants to do well. Everybody wants to succeed. Everybody wants to get on the honor roll. But do you have the will to do what you need to do in order to be able to get to the places you want to be? And so, that's another thing that I think is something that I really emphasize. And I still have ex-students, when I run into them, say, man, you taught me how to prepare. You taught me how to study. You taught me how to be organized. And so all those things are things that I really built into my my teaching routines, besides, being able to communicate, the concepts that I'm supposed to be teaching too. But I think all these other kind of like secondary functions are also important to be able to get a student that's good and well-rounded and are actually benefiting from your class.
Yeah, you marked us on our organization. I remember those like little like duotangs, and you gave us
the portfolios.
Yes, the portfolios.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember that, and I was going, this is peculiar. I've never done this. Why is he marking us on our organization? Now in retrospect, the people that are organized, that are structured, they're the ones that do succeed. And you model this discipline lifestyle when it comes to teaching. You get your tests and you mark them as soon as you get them, and you try to get feedback to the students as soon as possible. You preach organization, but at the same time, you also have humor into it, because sure, you can hustle, but it takes all the fun out of it if you don't add in a little bit of humor. So that way, like, when you're too kind to the students, you're too humorous, they kind of lose that respect. But as soon as you add in that discipline, that, hey, there's gonna be that structure, there's gonna be rules, I won't budge. And you didn't. And the kids took you seriously, but you were also that benevolent ruler. Hey. And I think you mentioned on here that,
I'll get to that.
I'll get to that later on. But, it seems that you have changed a lot of students' lives, and continually to this day, I still talk to a lot of the students, that even they were on this podcast, Adri Pleasure, and he was the kid, we were in the same class. He would tip his chair onto the back, and you warned him like 100 times, and so you sent him all the way to the back of the classroom against the wall. That way he wasn't able.
I think he probably fell out of his chair, so I said, well, you got to go sit in the desk with training wheels, right? The one that had the desk and the chair attached, so we didn't have to worry about. I was always worried about concussions. So I said, we don't want you falling. And of course, I remember so I deliberately called him Adri for the whole day, for the whole year, because I said, until you start following the rules, you're not Adri, you're Adri. But he never actually corrected me.
Funny thing is, he goes by both now. I don't know if you're the one that created it. He goes by both. Like, hey, people ask him, hey, do we call you Adri or Adri? And he goes, it doesn't matter.
Well, that gets me on to a different topic, and that's names. So, names now have changed a lot since when I first started teaching. I could look at a class list back when I first started teaching, and you didn't have to put M or F after each person's name. I knew which ones were boys' names, which ones were girls' names. So, I mean, you're getting a lot more names now that are gender neutral, but you're also getting a lot of names that are kind of crazy too.
Exotic,
or spelled in ways that the spelling doesn't match the pronunciation. And so it's interesting, like when I substitute teach, I'm going into a class that I don't really know, I have to do the attendance. So I have to read off all the names to make sure everybody is there. And I bet you I get 50% of them wrong. And I bet you of that 50%, 25% take offense that I'm mispronouncing their name. And I said, well, you know what? Maybe have a conversation with your parents and maybe change the spelling so it's phonetic, because if I'm pronouncing it wrong, probably everybody else for the rest of your life are going to be pronouncing it wrong too.
True.
So I think there should be a rule for names. I think you can't name a child unless the name appears in a actual baby name book.
Yeah, that should be real. We'll have to come into contact with the legislature. And so you have instilled a lot of great values into the students, and certainly to this day, even after retirement, you continually still change the trajectory of kids' lives. Who has taught you this? Who's there to thank for? Certainly, I'm a firm believer that we can't get through life alone, and all the lessons that we've learned, the why we do things, and the reason we go through life is for other people, right? And as well, the students matter to you. But who are the people in the background that have supported you through all this to this long journey that still hasn't ended yet?
Well, the first people I have to thank are my family, of course. So when I first started teaching, I was married at the time, and my wife and I made a pretty significant decision that when we started having kids, that she was going to stay home and raise the kids, and we were just basically going to be a one-income family. And that allowed me to be able to do a lot of the things in teaching that maybe would be a little bit more trickier to do if both adults in the family were working, because you would have to share a lot of the responsibilities of the home, I guess, and the raising of the children. So I did a lot of coaching when I was teaching. I coached for about 18 years, and that would take you away from your family a lot, because there were commitments after school. There were tournaments that you would do on the weekends, and if I did 2 sports a year, that would probably be about 6 months of the year. So I really have my wife to thank for, in that I always knew things on the home front were always being looked after, because she was a great mother to our 3 children, and they've turned out to be great young adults and very, very successful. But the support from my own kids in what I was doing, and my daughter is married now to a very nice young man, and so he's a very important part of our family. My oldest son is engaged, and his fiance, a very, very nice person. My youngest son and his girlfriend are, seem very, very happy together. I don't want to jinx anything, but it's good to see that, our family is healthy and thriving. And I have my wife a lot to thank for that, because the job took me away from a lot of that stuff, especially in their formative years. So my family really did allow me to be able to, I guess, conduct my career in a manner that I thought was going to be the most effective and most fulfilling. But you also have to have some professional support too. So there's a group that I want to give a shout out to here, because they've been a very, very important part of my career. And that is a group called Team Solid. And it's a group of teachers and educators. Like one of our members was an educational assistant. And we get together about once a month for what we refer to as Wings Wednesday. So we'll find a local establishment that has chicken wings on for a good price, and we'll sit around and trade tales and provide support for each other. And what was really important with that group is that you could speak freely with them. We actually had a saying called, we're under the dome here, which meant there was a dome of silence, so that whatever was spoken under the dome didn't go any further than the people who were actually under that dome. And I recommend to teachers, like, it is a tough job now, and there's all sorts of demands on you. I really recommend to anybody who is teaching or thinking of teaching that you got to get a good support group of colleagues that you trust, and that they have your back and that they're going to listen to you. And, besides you getting benefit from that, there's probably an awful lot too that you can offer to, anybody in your group that is, maybe having some struggles or needs some advice or whatever. And so that group has been very, very important to me too. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned my family and Team Solid in this podcast because they've meant an awful lot to me in my career.
Yeah, certainly we couldn't do the things that we need to do without the love and support. Because if your wife wasn't there, then who's going to take care of the kids?
Exactly.
Right? And it's just, you'd have to worry about the thing because there's already so much going on. You have coaching, you have to make sure you mark those tests, you have to make sure you eat at a time, and then you can't go back and prepare the meals, right? There's all these things in place, and we can't get through this life alone. And even that support system with teaching, there's all these stories because there's certainly I have some friends of mine that are teachers now. You taught me 10 years ago. It's crazy that some of my classmates, they're teachers now. And a lot of them say that teaching is difficult because a lot of the kids these days are even, it's always been a tough job because you're dealing with just different types of people. And some of them, they're volatile kids, and some kids, they're mama's boys, papa's boys, and their parents storm in, and you have to deal with that. And you need the support system in place to be able to get through those days.
Well, you bring up some really good points. When I think about it, like the job has become very, very difficult. And what I've been able to do a little bit since I've been substitute teaching is, I run into an awful lot of teachers throughout because I'm going to, I substitute between two different schools, but I still run into a lot of staff. And I remember sitting down with a group of teachers. We were having a departmental lunch one day, and I could hear them talk like that. I was there listening to them, and a lot of them were saying, I feel like I'm just being stretched in so many directions. I don't feel like I'm a great teacher. I don't feel like I'm a great parent. I don't feel like I'm a great spouse. I'm just not being that good at anything, and I just feel like I'm exhausted. I'm tired. And what I shared with them is that your career goes through certain ebbs and flows. Like the first 5 years that you become a teacher, you're very enthused. There's lots of energy. You're excited about what you're doing. But that eventually wears off. And then you go through a period of time where once you get probably past that 5-year time, you're probably married, you're starting to have kids. There's other demands being placed on you. And it's really hard to try to achieve that work-life balance. Because as a teacher, you really default to your clients, which are your students. Like they need me to give 100%, but then at the same time, your family needs you to give 100% too. And so really that's like 200%. So you can see where people start to get burned out with that. But I said, what I found in my career was that would come to pass. And you might go through some periods of time where it seems a little bit bleak. You're kind of in the middle of the tunnel and there's no light at the end or at the beginning. But once your kids kind of get to a point where they're able to be a little bit more independent, and then you kind of just almost become, what I found was I just kind of became satisfied with what I was doing and then learned to really embrace it and live those moments, because I was thinking, I've never been bored in my job. Like I've never ever clock watched or anything like that. And so the message I tried to give to those teachers was that, this too shall pass, and you're going to get to a point in your career where you're really going to enjoy what you're doing. And I would say probably for the last 20 years or so of my career, I've just absolutely loved it.
That's phenomenal, Mr. Boyne. So is it okay if we take a little break?
Yeah.
That's the first topic.
The first topic?
Yeah.
Wow. Start that one again.
Start that one again. Yeah. Little mishap, but
That's
good.
all right.
I caught that. The start. Yeah. So why Mr. Boyne still teaches, even though he's retired? So what keeps you going? Keep coming back to teaching even after officially retiring.
Oh, Avin, the money is really good. So it's true. I get to double dip. So I collect my teacher's pension and my CPP, and the money that I make with substitute teaching allows my wife and I to do an awful lot of traveling. So, for instance, this coming fall, my son is getting married in Australia. So we're going to go to Australia. Now it's our second time there. He's been there for 8 years.
That's exciting.
So he's getting married in Australia. So we're going to be there for 3 weeks. And so we'll spend he lives in Melbourne. So we'll spend about 10 days there. And then we're going to travel up the Gold Coast because we're in October. And so the further north you go, the warmer it gets. So we'll spend some time at on the Gold Coast, which is a nice beachy kind of area. And then back for about 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And then we're going to go to India. And my son's fiance is from India. So their tradition is to have a celebration there. And so that's going to be in late December. So we'll be traveling over Christmas. But since we're all the way there, we wanted to make it more worthwhile. So my wife and I know for sure my youngest son and his girlfriend are going to do a 10-day tour of the Golden Triangle, which is kind of located in central India. And it's probably one of the more scenic, beautiful places. Taj Mahal is there. And, it's probably not going to be a place that I go and visit again. So we want to make sure that we make it worth our while. If it was just a regular year, what we typically do is we spend some time on Vancouver Island in the summers. And we go to Palm Springs for a little while in the winter. And so with the money that I get from substitute teaching, that really does help enhance our lifestyle. Now, that's not the only reason I really do that, folks. I still feel like I can connect with kids. And I think, as I said earlier, I get the opportunity to teach in a lot of different settings. And the really interesting thing about going to the high school is probably more than half the kids that attend there are kids that I know. And so it's just, you just never know who you're going to meet up with, maybe in one of your classes or in the hallways or at lunchtime when you're doing some supervision. It just seems like there's always somebody to talk to and reminisce a little bit with. But I think the big thing that I really feel that I can give is my ability to make people laugh. We live in a very since the pandemic especially, there's an awful lot of people out there that are suffering. They suffer from mental health issues. Maybe their families are struggling. Even here in Sherwood Park, you see that. A lot of families that have split up. And if I'm able to, well, first of all, be able to teach them something, but make it kind of fun and humorous and entertaining, and I'm able to make that person laugh, maybe that's something that they find to be the highlight of their day. I'm not sure, but I just really try my best to make people feel as comfortable and as welcome as they should be in my classes. And if that's something that they can take away as being a positive for their day, then I think I still have value to the profession.
And because you never truly know what's happening in the household. Hey,
absolutely
you had
not.
mentioned the pandemic. I've seen it in a lot of people that I know, just from before and after. It seems to be the social skills these days have really taken a dip, and the kids and their mental health, like staying at home online for a couple years, the developments for kids in those very critical periods, it's really sad to witness just how far we have fallen, but it's just those days when we need to be able to build back up. We need that humor. We need to be able to find kind of the joy in the everyday. And while people like you are, it's phenomenal what you're doing, and I'm sure a lot of people are thankful for it. I know I am.
Well, thank you for that. The other thing too is colleagues. Same thing that adults don't go unaffected by what has happened with the pandemic too. And as I said a little bit earlier in our interview, that the demands on teachers are quite high. And I feel like I'm the kind of person that people can go and approach and ask me for advice. I've had teachers, younger teachers, ask me about, well, what should I do career-wise as far as, should I take this job? Should I, or maybe they're on a temporary contract and they haven't been retained in the same position. Like, what should I do? Like, what's my next move? And it's not like I have all the answers, but I can certainly be a voice that they can maybe listen to, and I might give them some advice that they find useful. One teacher has this little saying, WWBD, what would Bill do? So like if there's a difficult situation or whatever, like, should we, maybe I'll ask him and, sound him out as far as how I should respond to a certain situation that I find myself in. So, those are all things that I think I can lend an ear to listen, and maybe be able to just say the right thing to that person to maybe help allay any stress that they might have, or maybe send them in a direction that's going to make them feel happier with what they're doing in terms of their chosen profession.
Yeah, certainly talking to individuals that have retired. I go to the Glen Allen sauna a lot, and certainly the demographic are
they're much older there. I tend to hang out with the young ones, the younger people at Millennium Place.
They provide me insights that are just so effective, and that they're so life changing. And you guys know, because you guys have already been there many times over, 100 times. I was asking just different questions on what I should do with this career-wise or relationships. And that's why a lot of these student teachers gravitate towards you, and they ask you a lot of questions because they know you've already been through all the dilemmas and the ebbs and flows.
Well, it's interesting too, because just this past year, so I had this, as I said, I was over at my old school for the last 3 months of the year, and I had this one class that was kind of, they were a bit of a difficult bunch. They were fine, but of my 3 classes, they were the ones that were probably the most challenging. And so they had a student teacher who was actually a former student of mine. And one of the kids one day said, do you know that Mr. So-and-so said he became a teacher because you taught him? And I went, what, really? Like, because this guy always seemed to be in trouble with me all the time. But it's interesting. When you think about what a teacher has to do, they basically have a group of people in front of them, and you're asking them to do things that they probably don't want to do, but they're going to need to do it in order to be able to get to reach the goals that they want to reach in life. And they may not realize it at the time, but it's, upon further reflection, as you get a little bit older, a little bit more mature, and then you start to realize, why the message was being delivered to you in that way. And why, I always said this, that if you know that I care about you, if I'm on top of you all the time, as far as, making sure that you're trying to be your best, even if you think that maybe what I'm asking you for is unreasonable, or that, I might be just, needling you along. It's because I care, and I want to be able to light that fire under you to try to, get you to, be your full potential.
It's that tough love, because the more you coddle someone, the more you try to protect them from all the harm. Once they go about in the real world and they experience someone that, hey, this boss of mine isn't going to put up with this late assignment, you're going to get fired, or this relationship, if I don't get this done, they're going to leave me, or this friend, if I don't show up on time, they're going to think I'm not trustworthy and
or unreliable.
Yeah. And I remember going up to you, it was this section about like foundations and like building structures. And I had been gaming the night before. I didn't really have much time to study. And
you would have been one of my Fortnite jokes then.
No. Fortnite was after. That was in my generation.
So that would have been, okay.
That was like 3 years after. So that was like, we were with you 2013, 2014.
So it was Fortnite after that?
Fortnite was after that. Fortnite was like 2016, 2017.
The one where you go steal cars. What was that one? Grand Theft Auto. Maybe too much Grand Theft Auto. Yeah.
I went up to you and I was like, Mr. Boyne, please let me rewrite. And I had the crocodile tears. I was going, please, please, please. And you were stern. Like you were, it's not like you didn't care in your tone of voice, but these were the consequences. And you even like, it wasn't like it's that tough love. And now looking back, I'm thankful that there were teachers like you that, hey, there's going to be consequences to my actions. Had every single teacher told me, oh, you can put it off, oh, you can do this, I wouldn't be who I am today. And it's these little lessons that you instill. And maybe for a kid who has got neglectful parents, maybe you were the only disciplinary figure in their life. And so when they see someone like you establishing rules, establishing the foundation, they're shocked. They're like, whoa, my parents have never said no to me my entire life. And here is a teacher who has taught me this couple of months saying, no, Stern, you're going to suffer the 60%. And with kids, I'm sure a lot of them don't tell you because they're shy to go up to the millennium. I know I've talked with a lot of my friends who you formerly taught, and like, just go up to Mr. Boyne. Like he's fine. Like he's taught me a lot. Like just go up to him.
Well, it's kind of hard for me sometimes too, because you guys change your appearance so much more than I change mine. So like, for instance, I bumped into a guy last Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
He says, hey, Mr. Boyne, like having a good workout. And I go, yeah, you're going to have to help me out with your name. And he goes, so he gives me his first name. I said, well, what about your last name? And so he gives me his, and I says, man, the last time I saw you, you were like about 5'1", and now you're 6'1".
6 foot huge.
Yeah, huge. I remember last year that I coached volleyball, I coached boys team, and he was the little setter that I had on the team. And so, yeah, it's like, you know what? If you see me in the community, if you see me anywhere, don't be afraid to come up, and I don't mind. I'd love to hear what you've been up to. If I'm at Millennium and it looks like I'm really working hard on a workout, I'm probably ready for a break. So, like I don't mind talking to you. Like, just don't be shy.
This guy's a yapper. That's actually
as long as I'm not the yapper and I spend too much time. But then you just have to give me the signal that, okay, we've talked long enough now.
That's what the nickname they give you, hey?
The nickname that the kids gave me here just recently was, they called me the yapper because I would yap. But I told them, you know what? The more I yap, the less work that you're going to have to do. So
can you share any particular experiences or moments that reaffirmed your decisions to continue teaching post-retirement?
Well, I think I've probably touched on this already, but it was, well, first of all, if I stayed at home, I'd just get in my wife's hair. Like, I mean, I'm kind of a restless person. So I need to almost feel like I have a purpose. Like
that structure.
I don't mind my downtime, but I also need to have some purpose too. And I feel like, that I'm able to still be able to do the job. And I intend on continuing, for as long as that happens. As I always say, like, you got to kind of know when to leave the stage, right? So if they're still applauding, that's a good time to leave the stage. You don't want to leave the stage when they're throwing, eggs and rotten tomatoes at you. So I still feel that I'm able to do my job effectively. Just a little bit of context with this last group of kids that I taught. The teacher I replaced was quite a popular teacher. And when she relayed this story to me, she said that when she told them who was coming in to replace them, they were all very, very concerned because it's like old school Mr. Structure Boyne coming in here, and it's gonna, like we're gonna roll back time 20 some odd years. And I remember when I first came in, the looks on their faces, they just looked all really sad that I was there. And I thought, wow, this is going to be a tough audience here. And the first month, I was only there really kind of as a caretaker because I thought initially I might only be there for a month. So I didn't really want to, alter the routines too much or anything like that. But the teacher I replaced definitely had a much different style of teaching than I did. But once I found out that I was going to be there for the rest of the year, which was probably maybe a little bit more than 2 months before the year was over, I really tried to put my stamp on those classes. And I felt like I really won them over. I think by the time we got to the end of June, everybody was pretty pleased that I'd come in there and kind of appreciated what I had done. And my style kind of grew on them. And, the humor, of course, made a big, big difference too. So, if I feel like I can still be able to have that effect on students, then I might as well keep going here.
Yeah, you got your gift. You still got potential. Right, you're there. Everybody's still applauding, Mr. Boyne. So
yeah, so it's either like
throwing tomatoes yet.
It's either going to be whether that lasts or I hit age 70. So once I hit age 70, I got to take my old age security. So that might put me in too high a tax bracket if I go beyond there. And I think my wife might be saying too, okay, I think you're done here. You're 70 years old, but that's still a couple years away.
Fair. You had this student you had mentioned in grade 9, was it? And she was struggling with math. Can you go deeper on that?
So I would say, so first off, I always appreciate it. So usually at Christmas time, the end of the school year, I would get cards, gifts, and that sort of thing. And I always really appreciated that. What I really loved, though, was the cards. And I would read every one of them. And sometimes I'd read them more than once because some of the things that the people have written in those cards mean so much. And it's like the payback for all the things that you have to do as a teacher. Just being able to read, what a person thought of you as their mentor, as their teacher. And I have a big treasure chest at home. And I bet you I have cards in there that are 25 years old. I don't throw anything away. And so I've kept all those memories. But I had this one particular encounter at my retirement in June 2022, where a former student of mine attended. And I remember her name and everything, but I don't remember a whole lot of her after grade 9. And she said, you basically changed my path in education. And I says, really? She says, yeah. Do you remember at the end of grade 9, I hadn't really done that well in math. And it was kind of on the borderline of whether I was going to be able to take the academic route or whether I was going to have to go an alternative route because my marks weren't that great. And I says, yeah, I remember having that conversation. And she says, and remember you were kind of having some doubts because what would happen in grade 9 is you would have to sign off on what course you were going to recommend a student to go into for grade 10, because that's when math kind of split into three different streams, right? And usually they would go with the recommendation of the grade 9 teacher. If a parent went and tried to appeal it or anything like that, usually if the parent got their way, it was like, well, you're doing this at your peril because the person that knows best is saying that this isn't a good idea. And I decided to put her into the academic stream. And she said, that just meant so much to me that you actually had that kind of belief in me, that you went and signed off on that and gave me the opportunity to take the academic route. So, and I had really kind of lost track of her. And she completed high school, went and got her bachelor's degree, completed her master's degree. And when she came to my retirement, she had something for me. And she says, here, this is my first published copy of my master's thesis. I want you to have it because you believed in me and just set me on the right path for the rest of my education journey. And I was just really floored by that, because as teachers, you just don't sometimes realize how much power your words and actions have with the kids that you come into contact with. Like, I could have easily gone the other way and said, no, like, you didn't earn your way through to that. So this is the way I'm going to, so I'm not going to sign off on this. And, you know, would she have reached the same heights that she did by me making the decision the other way? And so I just realized how much power words have. And we have to really be careful with those words that we use, because they might just be words coming out of my mouth, but they might mean the world to the people that are hearing my words. And so it took me quite a while in my career to realize that, but I'm so careful with my words now.
You have this student who, was questioning themselves at that point, right, to an extent, and maybe at that point nobody believed in them. But then here you are, you give them that pass, they go into that stream, and the fact that that student made the effort of coming back here, presenting that thesis, because that's something just I've never heard. Like, I only see that in movies. I only see that on like the stories that you just like that really touch you. This isn't the only time she's thought of you. In all those times after, she's thought, okay, this is, somebody believed in me. Okay, now I get my degree. Then after that, somebody believed in me. I go to my master's. And then that belief where you believed in her and she came back all the way. Yeah. That's such an honor, and that's so beautiful, and that's just so. I think that's why teachers teach, and like for stories like that.
Well, and that's really where the payoff is in this profession. I made some light of the fact that the money was good. The money isn't really all that good, but it's these personal affirmations that you get from kids that you've taught over the years. And, like when you hear a story like that, it's more than just teaching them something. It's I guess how I carried myself with her that made the impression that, and I gave her I have to give her credit. I gave her an opportunity, and she seized that opportunity and made the absolute most out of it, which makes me very proud of that young lady too. For sure.
That's phenomenal. And I bet you 100%, Mr. Boyne, there are countless students out there. You put on here, you probably thought approximately 5,000 students.
I'd say about 5,000 over the course of
a lot of them have kids now. A lot of them are in their full-time careers. A lot of them are just entering university. A lot of them are graduating university, and they're just so busy. But I bet you if they had more free time, they'd probably come to you and they'd thank you for it. And I'm sure you pop into their minds like me multiple times throughout the lessons in the university or even throughout life. And that's incredible that you are able to leave that impact and continue to do so even after retirement, and continue to craft your teaching methods and like see how the evolution of students go, and be able to adapt with the self-deprecation jokes and just like the pranks, and just be able to instill the discipline but also add humor. It's truly remarkable. And I can see you still continue to do that even after retirement. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know what, I sometimes become annoyed with some of my colleagues that say, oh, I don't want to go to Millennium Place, or I don't like shopping close to the school or whatever, because I'm worried I'm going to run into one of my students. And I just, for me, the greatest compliment that you can pay a teacher is to have a former student. And like, we are asking you guys to do things we're asking you to do the tough things. It's, we're saying, you got to do your homework. You got to study more, even though you might be, you might have some leisure activities you want to be doing. I'm always preaching school comes first, because school is going to lead to your life's work. So we're asking you to do an awful lot. And sometimes you'll get in trouble with me. But the biggest compliment is when I have a student who actually wants to come up and say hello and ask me how things are going. And then it gives me the opportunity to also ask, well, how's your life going? I'm interested to hear about that. And so I've never, ever shied away from the fact that I might run into somebody in the community that I don't want to really talk to.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that pretty much covers the second topic. Let's take a little break. Thank you for that. That was a phenomenal second topic. And then next up, we've got the funny stories.
Oh, well, this is my favorite part.
Okay.
So yes, I'm being given the opportunity to talk about some funny stories that have happened in my career. Okay.
This is going to be
and I'm going
incredible.
to go, I know a lot of you that are listening didn't know me in my career before, so I'm going to share a couple stories from there. So first one I want to talk about is a couple incidents that happened in the Young Offender Center. Now, let's get this straight. Young offenders are not really a barrel of laughs, right? It's not so much they made something funny. It was things that they did that to the outside person would appear to be absolutely funny. So, as I said before, in a lot of these institutions, they had school programs because it was the easy way to get daytime programming going. But in the Young Offender Center, they had like a work experience program too. So one of the places where some of the inmates could work, and it was usually about 5 or 6 lucky ones that got to do this, is in the kitchen. So they were kitchen helpers. And so, I would hear stories about them. They'd walk by the big vat of soup and they'd be spitting in it or something like that. And so, of course, that's why whenever I worked there, I brought a bag lunch.
Gotta
because,
be safe. You can't trust
I just
the soup.
thought that, if they're telling me that, it's probably true. But the one funniest story that I had was, so all these guys that were on the work crew lived on the same, the Young Offender Center is divided into units, and they lived in the same unit. And the staff there couldn't figure out, for a period of about 10 days, they were coming back and they were jolly and giddy and happy. And you're in a Young Offender Center, you figure you're not going to be coming back jolly, giddy, and happy.
It's strange.
So, they kind of let this go for a little bit. And then they said, well, there's got to be something going on here. Yeah, and it's just the people out of the kitchen that are coming back happy and giddy. Well, it was soon discovered that some rotten fruit had gone missing. And what these guys had done was they had taken a couple boxes of rotten fruit and stuffed it up in the false ceiling in the kitchen. And then they had gotten some yeast and some sugar and some water, and they were making moonshine.
Oh,
and they were drinking the moonshine while they were on shift. So hence they would come back all giddy and happy and inebriated. So, and of course, moonshine doesn't have an odor to it. So it's not like, a lot of your spirits that you can actually smell somebody's breath and tell that they've been drinking. The moonshine is just basically a clear liquid that has a very high alcohol content. And so that's what these guys are up to. Another one is referred to as a process called sparking. So contraband was a big problem in these places, like trying to smuggle in, any sort of illegal materials. So cigarettes were a big one. And what they would do is not so much worry about the cigarettes. They just didn't want to be able to have them have access to something that would actually ignite the cigarettes. And so things like matches and strikers on matchbooks and that sort of thing were small things that they could easily hide away. And so there was quite a big focus on making sure none of that got in. So what somebody discovered, and it became a fairly common practice, is this process called sparking. So you would take a pencil with an eraser on the end. You would grab a paperclip, break off part of the paperclip, stick the paperclip into the eraser, get some toilet paper, wrap it around the end of the pencil and the paperclip, and then stick the paperclip inside an electrical plug outlet. And of course, you would short out the outlet, big spark would come out, it would light the toilet paper on fire, and then you could actually light your cigarette. And
Wow.
so
Imagine if these kids had put that amount of energy to studying and getting better. These are such creative.
There's a moral to this story here. So what ended up happening is wasn't funny for the person that actually was victimized by this, but one of the guys, when they had stuck that paperclip in, when they were pulling it out, they broke off part of the paperclip. And so the metal part of that paperclip was inside that plug outlet. And one of the guards came by to plug something in, and he got the shock of his life because, of course, you plug it in, it shorts out, and, great big jolt with that guy. And one thing I said was, no, at least they were paying attention to my science classes, because their knowledge of chemistry and electrical conductivity was quite impressive.
That's awesome.
Another kind of funny story here is about my adventures with technology. So, Advin, you remember that I was all about overhead projectors.
Right. No, before we get into that story, I just need to change the memory on here.
Okay.
But I'm excited for that one.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
No, I read that one. Just it's full now. And for this one, yeah, we can go as long as.
Well, I think it's basically stories now.
Yeah, and then the journey with the projector and.
Yeah. Do you want to do funny stories? Or do you want to do this journey with the projector here? Because that kind of comes next.
I think we do journey with the projector, and then we'll finish off with all the funny stories.
All right. Because it is a funny story, the journey with the projector too. Yeah,
so I don't want to spoil it to people, but for people that were in Mr. Boyne's class, former students, this guy projector just couldn't let go. But yeah, but you've learned now.
Well, I you know what? It's funny you mentioned that, because I tied my impending retirement based on whether I could still source replacement bulbs for my overhead projector, because I really had no inclination at all to learn any new technology, because felt like I was getting pretty close to the end of my career. And so I would, it was funny because whenever a bulb would burn out, you'd hear somebody say, well, how many more do you have to go now? Right. And then there was a while where I couldn't get them, but I had a very resourceful administrative assistant at her school that managed to find them. And she actually bought them off of eBay. And so she found these on eBay. She was very good at, like if I asked for something, and usually I was asking for something that was, common in the 1960s or 70s, not 2000 and teens or 2000s and 20s. And she would be able to find these things. So I came back. I think I was able to get 8 more. And I said, oh, look, I got another 5 years still. Right. So, and some would kind of groan, and I'd have a few that might cheer. But so in the end, it didn't come down to light bulbs that ended the overhead projector. The last day that I used, I remember this day. It was March 15th, 2020. That was the last day I used an overhead projector. And that was because on that Sunday of that weekend, it was announced that schools would be closed because of COVID-19 and the impending pandemic. And so we had a week to basically pivot from delivering education in person to delivering education to students who were now like taking refuge at home. And it was probably the biggest change that I had in my entire career, and certainly by far the fastest change, because now I had to figure out a way. Like, there's just no way. Was I going to set up a video camera that was going to, see me projecting my overhead projector on a screen? And of course, I would drive. I had one principal. I just drove him nuts. He wanted me to, get with the times, and so I put a smart board in my room, $5,000 smart board, and then I would just use the screen to project my overhead projector on it. And he'd come by and like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well,
just use the smart board."
I said, "No, I'm not smart enough to use a smart board." So as it turned out, within a matter of a week, I had to figure out what I was going to do, and I wanted to be able to continue to teach as close as I could to the kids when they were at home as I did when they were actually at school. So I had to figure out, an electronic whiteboard so I could still do my copious, the copious amount of notes that I would give in math and science and everything.
I remember.
And I wanted things to be as close as they could be to regular school. So my son in Australia, he did a lot of that kind of stuff where he would be doing a lot of Zoom meetings where he would have to do presentations and everything. Now, we weren't using a Zoom platform. We were using a Google platform. But he was skilled enough that he was able to be able to adapt. So I bet you him and I spent 3 consecutive nights on the phone, him in Australia, me in Alberta, Canada, working through the procedures and trying out different things. And eventually we came up with a set of procedures. I think there was about 20 of them. We had 2 different computers. And the way it would work is I would use my main computer for my Google Meet. And then I would use my Chromebook, which I could use with a stylus for my electronic whiteboard. And then I would invite my whiteboard to the meeting. And so the whiteboard would be like one of the attendees. And then I could actually write on the whiteboard, and then everybody could see what was being written on the whiteboard through the main feed on my Google Classroom.
Was this all new to you? Was this probably like revolutionary?
I knew Google Classroom, but I rarely used it. It was one of those things. Yeah, well, it's great, it's there, but I'm never going to need this because I'm going to retire, right? So, and part of, I guess maybe why I put off retirement was the pandemic years were just not good years, I thought, to end things. You wouldn't be really ending on a high note, I don't think. And I wanted to end my career on a high note. So I figured I had to stay, beyond that until it seemed like we were kind of transitioning back to, a more traditional education program that we had prior to the pandemic. But really, the procedures that I used worked fine. About the only thing I would have to really worry about is, I was a real kind of hard ass on attendance. And anytime somebody didn't show up, I would send an email home. But then what I began to discover was that people would just maybe sign in and then take off because I would sometimes end my classes early. And, it's, well, we're all done, so you guys can all sign off. And I'd have about 5 or 6 people who are still on. And I'm going, hey, guys, wake up now. I'm done. You can sign off. And I knew these were the ones that weren't actually listening, that had gone and done something else or were. Yeah. And I know some of them were probably gaming on their other screen while they had my screen on too.
Everyone was doing that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, because you just had no way of monitoring the kids.
And then something a little bit more recent is now a big thing that teachers are having to deal with is AI. And I don't know why it took so long for AI to Chat GPT is great, but I mean, it was after I retired that this became kind of a useful tool. Whenever I have to, let's say I have a really difficult report card comment to write, it's great. I can just put some parameters in there and let Chat GPT go at it and, just kind of fine tune it a little bit. And it makes the job so much easier. If you have to write an email to a parent, that's kind of a sensitive one. It's a great tool. Now, what we had to worry about was, now, are the kids on the essay that you assigned using ChatGPT to write their essay? And I could tell, like, some kids handed in the first essay that I actually assigned, handed in some great work. And then I looked at their mark and it's like, no, they're getting 52%. How did that? They can't write like that. So called up one of my younger colleagues. And so, like, how do you screen for, anybody using AI? And so she put me on to no GPT. And so I was able to, the ones that I suspect, put them in, basically cut and paste, put it into the filter, and it would tell me the percent. So I had one kid who was 94.5% AI generated. So it was basically, yep, you cheated. And then I also found what would I call it? Revision history program. So I would just say, you have to use my Google Doc, and would attach this revision history on here. And I could see who was cutting and pasting, because one of the things that the revision history would indicate to me is the duration it would take for them to write their essay. So that, a lot of kids, it would be 2 to 3 hours, maybe, but you would get some where it was like 35 seconds. And I could do a replay of how they edited their document, and it would actually show up on my screen. And so the ones where, all of a sudden 2.5 pages automatically show up, it's like, okay, you're busted. Like, that's, you cut and paste this from somewhere.
Well, you got the smarter kids would chat GPT it and slowly add that on. Hey, and I think, how do you
I don't think anybody was that far ahead of the curve at the level I was at. But you're right. There's probably some ways to kind of game your way around it. But I was catching a lot of people, and the looks on their faces, they were thinking, man, this guy is in his late 60s, and he's actually busting me using something that I would think he didn't even know anything about.
I think a couple years back, you would have been lost in this fight against ChatGPT. But now, since you've gone through all this hard work with your son, and you've asked the younger colleague about ChatGPT and revision, now you can you're up to times now, Mr. Boyne.
Well, for a little while anyways, like I said, it's going to take a couple months, and something else is going to come along, and that's going to be the next best thing.
It's always evolving, and kids are always trying to find that edge, right, to ensure that they get the best possible mark with the least possible work.
Effort. Yes.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now you can go head to head with the teachers these days. It's just
it's there's still things that I'm probably not that strong on. Maybe doing things in the most efficient way and that sort of stuff. But I think the big ones are ones that I can handle my own on here now. So this is
testament, though, that your brain is still sharp and you can still adapt to the times to this day.
Well, one thing I find is things that used to take me 10 minutes to do now probably take me 20 to 30 minutes to do. So that's probably why I have to spend so much. And people say, why do you spend so much time? I said, well, my brain has slowed down here a little bit. What you can do in 10 minutes is going to take me 30 minutes to do. So that's why it takes me more time.
Even conversation wise, you put a lot of the previous guests I don't want to drop any names, but you put a lot of the previous guests to shame. I think you're so quick with the conversation, and you can get one point across. I think that's also for decades of teaching and being a parent too.
Well, and I did work on this, so.
Yeah.
As you can see, I got some notes right here in my lap here, so you can tell I was prepared here.
Fully prepared. You even got a copy from me. Let's go on to the stories.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What is the funniest or most unexpected things a student has ever said or done in your classroom? And you listed out a bunch after this question, so we'll just hammer them out and share some laughs.
Well, I don't know how many of you that are listening remember our outdoor ed trips that we would take to Gila Ventures. There was always a few funny stories that came out of there. I always liked the one where we're going to go out on the river, and we need some paddles for our canoes. And there's a big lineup, and I would say to a kid, Because I didn't feel like lining up to get my paddle. I just make a kid go and get one. And I said, make sure you ask the guide. I'm left-handed, so can you make sure that I get a left-handed paddle? And I remember one time, I would do this every single year. In fact, I even took a group of grade fives canoeing last year while I was subbing. I did the same thing to the poor kid in grade 5. But I remember one year where a guy gave this kid a kayak paddle. So, of course, paddles on both ends. And he said, tell your teacher that this works for a left-handed or a right-handed paddler. So, and the kid actually believed it, right? So I thought thought that was really funny.
Oh, the story with the tying together the shoes.
Yeah, so a little bit of mischief pranking too. One of the things that we made the kids do was they had to do canoe safety, because we're going down, like when we're paddling down North Saskatchewan River, depending on how much rain had fallen in the spring and how much runoff there was too from the winter, that river could be moving pretty fast. And so there were some rapids, some currents. So they had to go through a process where they were given some instruction on safety. And so they did this in a lodge, but you weren't allowed to walk into the lodge with your shoes on. So you had to leave your shoes outside the lodge by the doorway. And so you'd have maybe 30, 40 kids in there, and all the shoes would be piled outside the doorway. And so I remember the grade 8 kids were going in for their instruction. I think I was looking after the grade 7 kids that year, so I didn't have to be in there. And so I crawled along the ground so that nobody could see me through the big window, and proceeded to tie all the shoes together. Like every single shoe was tied together into one great big huge knot. And, of course, they came out and, everybody's like, who did this and everything. And I was saying, I think I saw some grade 7 kids around there. And so then, the fight was on, right? And
that's where you plant the seed.
I remember one of the other teachers who was also pretty good at pranks actually giving me heck for setting up the grade 7s. And I said, well, you would have done the same thing too, wouldn't you? And he denied it. He just caused us a whole bunch of trouble.
More
another thing that I've been doing here, so that's kind of the Gila stories, but I always like to catch kids off guard. So, they're walking down the hallway. I'll just say something casual like, your shoe's untied. And they'll look, and of course it's not untied. And what makes it even funnier is when they're wearing Crocs or sandals. I said, did they look? And I said, you're not even wearing something that's got laces on it. How come you're checking your shoe, right?
You can feel it.
Yeah. So just recently we had an awards ceremony at like a year-end academic award ceremony at our school. And, they made the big mistake of putting me up on the stage there to hand out some of the honor certificates. And so I made sure I put myself right at the very end. So, and there was a line of about 4 or 5 teachers. And so I was right where the kids ascended onto the stage up the steps. And every kid that walked by, I was saying, your shoe's untied, your shoe's untied, your shoe's untied. And I bet you more than 50% of them looked. And the ones that weren't even wearing shoes with laces, when they actually looked, I said, I'm taking that certificate back. I don't think you're an honor student.
Take that back. Like you have to restart this entire thing.
I did. Yeah. At least 50% looked. And some of them, it was funny because some of them who had been taught by me and had been victimized by this prank. Well, I'm not falling for any of your smart tricks there, Mr. Boyne.
They know.
About 6 years ago, we had an option called media arts. And so the basic premise behind this was that students would go around and they would videotape different little features. And once a week, we would have videotape announcements. And so, and we'd be able, I actually knew how to turn on the smart board or I probably got the smartest kid to turn on the smart board for me so that we could actually watch them. And so we would watch these videos. So this one group came by and said, hey, Mr. Boyne, we'd like to interview you about what it was like teaching in the good old days, right? And I says, oh, you know what? I think we could do better than that. Why don't we make a whole series of videos and we can give it a name? So Flashback Fridays with Mr. Boyne was born. And I think I made about half a dozen episodes, because just like you were telling me about this podcast, Advin, I would do this on my preps. So I would give up my preps just so that I could help these guys out. And I just thought it was a funny thing to do. And so, I'd have to kind of come up with a script or like some sort of a plan that we're going to do as far as what the episode was, and then kind of put it all together, but then coordinate with the people that had the, because this is Boyne pre-technology. So like the young kids were the ones that were able to, do the filming and the editing and everything that we needed to do this. But it all took time to do that.
I feel like this is like one of your stand-ups. Yeah, I feel like
that's it. And like we had some crazy episodes. I had one, what's in a name? So of course, in my earlier rant about names, and that one, by the way, was the first one that I shot. And we made that one fairly simple. I made sure I put everything that I wanted to talk about on my whiteboard. And then basically we shot, it was probably a 3-minute episode. We did it in one take. I managed to go through without having to, like I didn't flub a line or anything. I just kind of delivered it. But my favorite episode was the truant officer. So the truant officer was someone who was around during my day, and they were responsible for going around the community and making sure there weren't any young people hanging out in pool halls and things like that. That they would actually, it wasn't arrest them, but they would apprehend them and take them home to their parents. And so
we need that.
Yeah,
we need to bring that back.
Yeah, they don't have that anymore. So you would always have to be on the eye for the truant officer if you were skipping school when I was going to school. So we made an episode of that. And of course, I had this great big giant fish net that I was catching kids in with the truant officer. So I remember getting into my car with these kids that were, going to be some of the actors in this particular episode, and driving to about 3 different locations so that we could quickly shoot each of the pieces that we were going to put together. So I think I apprehended a kid coming out of a fitness facility. Another one, she was coming out of the nail salon. I can't remember. Oh, and then to the music of Chariots of Fire in slow motion, I chased a kid in the back schoolyard.
He actually ran?
And caught him. He ran, and I chased him and caught him with with my net and wrestled him to the ground, and basically tied them all together and dragged them into the principal's office. He wasn't there, so I just tied them to a door handle and said, "Okay, that's special delivery for the principal."
That is gold.
So it was. It was up on.
But those kids that skipped, it wasn't scripted. Like you actually went.
No, it was scripted.
Okay. Because I was
scripted.
I was thinking of like actual students.
You know what? If you look at the episode, it does look like it was real. But
good actors.
They were good actors. Yes, they were good actors.
So I just thought that these kids that you were with were making sure they were coordinating and finding the people.
No, we had each of these different ones scripted as far as what we were going to be doing. So of course, the guy walking out of the fitness center was busy admiring his biceps, not paying attention. And that's when I snuck out from behind one of the big garbage cans and nailed him. And the girl coming out looking at how nice her nails were and everything like that, and me sneaking up and catching her from behind.
Hey, you gotta bring this back into one of the classes you sub. Hey, when you guys got free time.
Well, it was up on YouTube. I haven't been able to find it because I thought sometimes it would be kind of funny to bring that up and just show people what I was up to back in the day. I'm just looking on my last year of teaching, I decided I would kind of let loose a little bit, especially in science. So I became known as the singing, dancing science teacher. So in kind of looking at a few of the things that we were doing, some of the topics I would tie in. So for instance, we're looking at structures, forces and structures. So I ended up putting on Chubby Checker and we all ended up doing the twist. And I mean, I had the entire class, all of my classes doing the twist up there with me. And some of them would jump up front.
We didn't get to do that.
No, I know. Like I said, I kind of evolved. When I got towards the end of my career, it was like, well, if they don't like this, it's not going to really matter because I'm going to retire anyways.
Our class, our grade.
No, I'm talking about the bosses coming by and saying,
fair.
what are they teaching you guys? Or the parent, what did you guys do in science? Say, well, we learned how to do the twist and we're listening to Chubby Checker. They're not going to talk. The kids aren't going to talk about the part that really ties in with the educational part.
But is this something you never forget, though? It's something.
And I mean, I still get kids coming to me and saying that was, I remember doing that. And the other one that I did too was we talked about the Ring of Fire with all the different volcanoes that go around the Pacific Rim. And so I would put on Johnny Cash singing the Ring of Fire and I would teach them all how to sing that song. So we'd all sing that song together. So
that's awesome.
A couple just really quick ones. I remember when I was coaching volleyball one time, we're at a tournament and just immense for those of you that I've coached over the years. I just enjoyed so much working with those teams. You really got to know people on your athletes on a different level because you spent a lot of time together. And, there were triumphs, there were disappointments, but overall, I always felt that the teams that I coached I had really, really good people, good co-coaches with me, great players. It was something that I really, really enjoyed doing. And it's probably why I did it for 18 years. But there's this one funny story that, I mean, I've never seen it happen before, but it actually happened to our team. So we're playing in a tournament game. I believe we're in Ardrossan. And I wasn't really getting along with the ref too well. I didn't like the way he was calling the game. And so I called a timeout. And my team saw me make the timeout signal and instantly came off the court. Well, the ref didn't grant me the timeout and then quickly whistled for the other team to serve the ball while none of us were on the court.
This ref has it out for you.
The court was completely empty. So you want to know what happened?
What happened?
The person on that team served and the ball sailed out the back of the court, our point.
Yes.
But I was so mad at that ref. I mean, I thought, yeah, you just did that because I'm giving you a hard time throughout this game here. And it was just another one I can think of is, so one way that I was able to get my test marked so quickly is I get you guys to help me. So, if it was a multiple choice test or something, I would say, all right, we're going to mark this multiple choice test here and make sure you do a good job. And then I'll just mark the short answer stuff. So there's always going to be somebody who was away. I think maybe I'm not sure why I had to give this one kid 2 tests, but I did. And so I go through, read off all the answers. And this girl that has 2 tests puts up her hand and says, can you go over the answers again so I can mark the second test? It's a true story. I'm not making this up. That was actually a true story.
What do you think was going on in there?
I don't know. I think there was a lot of airspace in there.
That's too funny.
I just another story. And this is a trip related story. This one is on a ski trip.
Oh, this one's my favorite. When I was reading this
we're
was
staying at
priceless.
the Jasper Park Lodge. And I'm good at this story because I've told it lots of times because, like people just want to hear this one. Staying at Jasper Park Lodge after a full day of skiing. And so usually we go back. People sometimes have a nap. Some people have a shower, whatever. And then we say, okay, well, we're going to go to Jasper Pizza at 5:30, be on the bus. And so one thing that we do as teachers is we always count who's on the bus. But when you're on a 2 or 3 day trip, that gets old after a while. And so I thought, okay, we've done this enough times already. So we had a buddy system. So everybody had to have a buddy. So I said to the other teacher on the bus, instead of counting, do you think I could just ask everybody if their buddy is here? And she says, yeah, I think that's fair. And so I said, okay, everybody's buddy here? And they said, yep. All right, so nobody's missing their buddy? Nope. So I think, all right, Bussy, let's go. And so away we go to Jasper Pizza. And it takes us probably about an hour to eat. So between going to Jasper, eating, about an hour and a half passes, we get on the bus to come home. So I said, all right, everybody here. And he says, no, Susie's not here. And I go, oh, well, somebody run into Jasper Pizza and tell her to hurry up. And the same kid says, no, she wasn't on the bus when we left the Jasper Park Lodge. I went, what? I said, like, what? How did that happen? I said, nobody's like, who's her buddy? Oh, her buddy is Amanda, and she broke her leg on the hill this afternoon, and she's actually in the hospital, so she wasn't around to say that Susie wasn't around. And I went, oh, shit. So it was like, and we're just starting with cell phones, and these kids, oh, Mr. Boyne actually lost somebody on a trip, and it's just like
They're going crazy.
And I'm going, oh, I said to the other teacher, I said, we got to get home fast so I can phone this kid's parents, because
Hurry.
I don't want these kids to be phoning home to their parents, and then this girl's mother finding out from somebody else. So we get back, and I get her number, and I quickly phone this girl's Susie's mother, and I get her, and there's all kinds of noise in the background. And here she's at a Nickelback concert. Well, first of all, who goes to Nickelback concerts, right? It's like it's. So she's at a Nickelback concert at the old Coliseum, and I'm trying to tell her, what happened. I said, we lost Susie. She heard that part, but she didn't hear the part where I said, but we found her. And of course, instant panic. She's like, you got to go to somewhere. You can't. Susie? Yeah, and I can hear her in the back. What do you mean? And so I said, find somewhere quiet so you can hear everything, right? So we finally found a quiet place, and
in that trudge to find a quiet place, she's like, oh gosh, cortisol levels. My daughter's
just
dead.
wondering what was going through her mind between leaving her seat at the concert and going to a spot where she was, going to talk to me further.
Frantic.
Yeah. So I mean, when kids now like give me a hard time about double counting whenever I'm on a bus, I just usually turn around and say, you realize I lost a kid one time on a trip? And I just end the statement right there without telling them whether I actually found them or not.
Look at each other like, okay, we gotta take this count seriously.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And for
but I've got one more. I want to kind of end with this one here, because I think this one, it's not necessarily a funny story, but it's probably something that I look at as almost like the perfect way to end a career. And it was totally spontaneous. So, as I said, I retired in June of 2022. And on the last day of school, everybody was going to go to West Edmonton Mall. And I thought, you know what? I'm going to take a personal day that day, because I didn't really want to just go and hang out at West Edmonton Mall. My days of, going down Montezuma's Revenge and all those other crazy, no, it's Nestle's Revenge. That's what it's called. Nestle's Revenge.
Orbiter?
Yeah,
you've gone through there.
I've gone down all those, yeah. But my days of doing that were kind of past me, right? I was kind of beyond thrill seeking like that.
You took the mind bender out.
Yeah, well, see, we actually can't go to the rides anymore. The insurance companies won't allow it, so you all have to go to the only thing they'll allow you to do is to go to the water park.
What?
Yes. So I wasn't really keen on doing that, and I needed to kind of get my room packed up, because the teacher that was going to come into my room was already moving some of her stuff in there. So I said, well, it'll be a nice quiet day. I'll just get everything done. Nobody's in the school. And so that's what I did. And I remember one of my colleagues came over from the high school, and we were talking, and he says, you think I could have that great big, I had a banner about, I think it was, says a day isn't great unless it has laughter. And I think he felt that was kind of that sort of was a statement about how I viewed life.
It's a good quote. I feel like that's like a premise of your life.
Well, I think it was actually hanging up when you were in my class.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing.
So it was one of those big long banner type things that I had up there. And so he says, "Can you autograph that for me?" And I had, just as a bit of a backstory, somebody had said to me, at the end of the year, can you autograph my portfolio? Because I was still using portfolios, and I would joke around with people, it's getting your autograph, and I would sign like Donald J. Trump, or I would sign Mick Jagger or whatever. But so I was kind of joking around with this, right? So the so it was still kind of quiet then. And so I said, yeah, sure, I'll sign that for you. And so we took it down, I signed it, and he was getting it packed up. And so around that time, the kids were coming back from West Edmonton Mall. And, I'd said to them that I, wasn't going to go on the trip with them. So they were just naturally assuming that I wasn't going to be around the school. But then word got out that I was actually there. And it was just like, just an influx of humanity came down our hallway to my classroom. And these kids were saying, can you sign my cell phone cover? Can you sign my pencil case? Can you sign my portfolio? Can you sign, can I have this poster? Can you sign this post? Like all this stuff that I think it was almost all ready to go to the garbage. And I had all these things piled up and I like, can you take a selfie with me? It was bedlam. It was crazy, but it was a good crazy. And I remember even one of the staff members going like, are you okay? Like, no, it's great. This is fantastic.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it was just like all these kids that I had taught and, some of them that I'd given a hard time and everything like that were all just coming by. They wanted to say goodbye. They wanted almost like a piece of something. So funny thing though, is I was out in the hallway signing stuff and all kinds of kids and some of them gone in my room and they were actually grabbing the other teacher's stuff and say, can you sign this? No, that's not mine. Somebody else is there. So, I mean, it was just crazy, but I mean, it's something that I will never, ever forget. It was amazing that there was so much love at the end that, these kids would want me, like, even like cell phone covers. They said, your parents aren't going to get mad for me writing on your cell phone cover that your parents probably paid for. And it was like, no, I was signing arms. I was signing legs. It was like, it was crazy. Like I needed 3 Sharpies because everybody wanted an autograph or they wanted a selfie or they wanted like anything. Just wanted to say goodbye. Thank you. So it was crazy, but it was probably one of the best moments of my teaching career.
That's beautiful. That's an amazing, terrific way of ending off the day. And you'll just see with a lot of teachers that kids don't do that normally. Just because someone's retiring, usually the paradigm when we hear that a teacher is retiring, it's like, oh, I never liked that teacher. Oh, you hear that with professors. You hear that with every single person. But the fact these kids came together and they wanted autographs here and there. They wanted to remember you. They wanted selfies. They wanted all these things. Clearly, that tough love, the structure, the foundation that laid out, the humor, they all derived a lesson from you, whether it be about just education. And I think it extends so far. And I think that quote where a day that goes by without laughter is a day wasted, certainly embodies who you are and kind of what it means to these kids. Because even then, when I see you, like going back to the gym, seeing you, it's laughter. You're still giving me jokes to this day. And I think a lot of kids who don't have that humor in their lives, you come in and you have this structure and you give them hope and you give them like this new way of teaching style that is uncommon, that it's not just for you don't see that in other teachers. Lots of these kids have gone through all of their elementary lives and then boom, they hit middle school and they go, whoa, this is a different style of teaching. Now, this is just testament to the change, to the degree of change that you've instilled in just that 1 year, right? Because that's just the 1 year you've taught.
Well, then that's the thing that, really surprises me is I could teach someone for 1 year, one subject, 5 days a week. And I just never thought that you could have make that much of an impression on somebody when you don't feel like you've spent a lot of time with them. But as I said, as I learned, and I learned it pretty late in my career, words and actions mean absolutely everything. So as a teacher, I feel like we have a great responsibility to make sure that we are careful with how we model ourselves with those that are watching and learning from you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Boyne.
Well, thank you.
Thank
I
you.
Have really enjoyed my time. And to those of you watching, it's great to be able to connect with you this way. And again, feel free if you see me in the community or anything like that, even if I have a bit of a old man scowl on my face. I mean, if you come up and introduce yourselves to me, that scowl will soon disappear and it'll be a nice, bright smile. You'll make my day. So thank you very much, Advent.
Oh, I'll just reach in there. Boom.
And to all of you listening, watching, there is a place for you in this chaotic world. Never lose hope, strengthen your faith, and keep it long term. Peace. Mr. Boyne, everyone.
Thank you.